Both the sessions, the pre-lunch, I was standing between you and lunch, and now I'm standing straight away after lunch in front of you. We have this topic, when Professor Saxena was instrumental in putting this whole thing together, and we found this to be the most exciting topic of all, because we're talking of the company for the future. What an organization is going to look at. Whole last 2 days, you've been hearing how the companies are going to get disrupted, what kind of models are going to be done. This session is going to be about 1.5 hours. It's got 1 hour 45 minutes there, but we're running late, so we're just keeping this to 1.5 hours. And what I will do is that I will introduce the panel members to you before we start, so that we could then move it in a very easy way going forward. So the first panel member we have a very esteemed panel, and so obviously there is a lot to, I would request each of you to be attentive so that we can learn and pick up a lot of nuggets from them. First is Professor Prem Roth, who's the Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Professor of Eminence and Chief Mentor of the North Cap University. He's an outstanding academic. Professor Prem Roth is the Pro-Chancellor and Pro of Eminence and Mentor of North Cap University, Gurgaon, formerly ITM University, Gurugram. Prior to joining ITMU as the Vice-Chancellor in September 2011, he was the Professor of Eminence at the MDI, Management Development Institute, Gurugram. Professor was also the founder director of IIT Roorkee, Vice Chancellor UP Technical University, Lucknow. Actually, there are a huge number of, if you, with your permission, can I, and obviously he has guided, there is a huge, his CV is huge because obviously he's got so much of experience. I can read out a few things like he has been on the board of governors of various technical institutions and universities, editorial boards of various foreign journals. He has guided many PhD theses, MTechs, BTechs. So there's a huge experience that is going to come out here for all of us to learn from. The next person we have is Dr. Sunil Bhardwaj. He's a senior analytics consultant at SAS India. Dr. Bhardwaj presently working as senior analytics consultant, education with SAS India. He has over 8 years of consulting and mentoring experience in SAS and the leading clients in India and abroad. He has total 14 years of total academic and industry experience. He has analytics domain expertise in operation research, big data, IoT, forecasting, high performance analytics. He has taken more than 50 SAS corporate clients analytics sessions worldwide, including clients like ANZ Bank, Accenture, PwC, Grameen Phone. He has more than 15 publications in the area of business analytics, and he has done his PhD from IBS, Hyderabad, Masters in Engineering from Allahabad, and Bachelor's in Technology. And third, but not the last, we have Dr. Veena Bora, who's the Associate Dean and Professor of Human Resource and Behavioral Sciences at the School of Business Management, NMIMS. She is a PhD and MBA in specialization in HR. So she understands this subject correctly, how an organization should be structured. She has completed a doctoral in the area of leadership, emotional intelligence, and appreciative inquiry. Veena has research interests in the areas of change management, trends in human resource management, leadership, emotional intelligence, qualitative research paradigm. She has published a number of research papers. I'm also just reducing see if you don't mind. Veena has successfully facilitated numerous learning interventions across corporates. She has effectively uses participant-centered pedagogy methods to craft a conducive learning environment. She specializes in enabling leadership behaviors and emotional intelligence enhancement, delivered programs on a worldwide basis. She has conducted training programs for Mahindra, British Telecom, BCCI, NTPC, Reliance, Thermax, and this is Reliance Industries, by the way, because there's all this confusion about Reliance. Chemtrol Engineering, Asian Heart Institute, RK Swami, BBDO, HDFC, Chubb, etc. So these are our panel members. We have a very interesting topic today, which is basically organizations of the future, structure, governance. I'll just give a few points from my side before I get into asking my panel members to come and give their presentations. The way I see it, there are key factors which are driving change, which we have heard over the last 2 days. At the cost of repeating a few, I will just talk about it. Routine tasks will be done by digital technology. So all the routine jobs will move, which are repetitive in nature, will move to AI, and the people will not do it. However, people will be deployed to more empowered roles. So skill and talent will radically shift. This will be a big shift in skill development. Disruptions in business, which we have heard the whole day along, will happen, will take constant spotlight. It will no more be, okay, it's happening, it's going to happen on a regular basis. Design thinking and digital will be the key. Digital in an era of connected ecosystem. We have heard all this in the last 2 days. So you are going to see, so the winners in this market are going to be those who thrive on actively shaping the ecosystem and outdoing others in the process. So think differently, design thinking ecosystems. So what is going to change? Even this hierarchy to collaborative working. Today we have this hierarchy. We are very used to it. I'm the boss and then everybody else is my servant. So all that is going to now shift to a very collaborative form of working. There will be empowered leadership. The leader is no more going to be directive. Leader is going to be somebody who's going to influence and going to motivate his team and get them to do the work. So, I mean, these are my views of it. Humility to provide space for where in certain areas give somebody else the leadership. A very junior person can be given the leadership because they know that place very well. The organization will need to be truly nimble and agile. So it will move to team-centric, design-centric, purpose-driven, dynamic, nimble, connected, socially networked. That is the kind of organization we're going to see. It's going to be organizations that are going to foster innovation-led growth, integrated viewpoint to be nimble, will redefine the capability and talent agenda. Today, you know, I've been a consultant all my life, so we sell hours to clients. I'm going to see a situation where employees will sell the hours to companies. So it'll be a shift from an employee to an entrepreneurial employee. I don't know what you're going to call that, but he will say, okay, I only got 2 hours in a day, but his skill you need, so you will pay him for those 2 hours. So those are the kind of things that one is going to see. Redefine capability and talent agenda. Purpose, value, ethics is going to take center stage. Purpose, value, and ethics. And let me put one more term out here. Something called higher purpose is going to take on. The why of my life. Higher purpose is going beyond. It is going to go beyond. It is all based on your values which you can. Navigation in an era of constant increasing disruption and disruption frameworks. So practices will have to evolve, which will create, you know, what we used to earlier talk of shareholder value, now we're going to talk of stakeholder value. So it has gone beyond. Every single stakeholder involved with that company. You have to see how the board meetings will constantly embed expertise in digital and disruptive technologies. So this is the kind of organizations which I'm seeing broadly. Now I leave it to the experts to come and give their viewpoints. And may I invite you, Professor, to come and give your viewpoint, and then we will do the other two. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, fellow panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the session that I'm supposed to speak on, the essence of that has already been given by the chairman, because I don't think anything beyond that will be merely paraphrasing and deliberating, because those are the key words. I thought that it was organization of future. But when I read that it was future of the organization, I can assure you they are two different things. But then, organization of future might actually ensure the future of the organization. So with that spirit, I make my presentation. I must also have a caveat before I say that when we talk of future, there's a saying that forecasting is always difficult, especially of the future. Because there are a lot many people who will be able to forecast the past. Oh, I did so, I told you so. Therefore, and this happened in fact, I remember when the turn of the century, many of my great colleagues in IIT Delhi were busy in producing what was known as Vision 2020. And theme was that India would be a developed nation by 2020. And very, very enthusiastically about it. I said that, are you sure about it? I says, but suppose it doesn't happen. He says, well, anyway, we'll not be around then. So therefore, the advantage of long-term forecasting is that even if you go wrong, which are likely to happen, there are not many accountability, on you. With this light to vein, let me now see the theme that I'm choosing. Because here, it is the structure of the organization of future, the structure, processes, technology. Here, the major driving force, which indeed has changed, is what is the technological change. The concept of what is now known as Industry 4.0. And I have seen wherever, in fact, I go in conferences in India, it seems that there is no other topic other than Industry 4.0 available for discussion. Because we in India have the great capacity of picking the latest under the sun and deliberate on that. And in the process, many times forget our real ground realities where we work. And therefore, today there's so much of discussion taking place on Industry 4.0. And Industry 4.0 is now leading to the disruption, which is actually leading to the Organization 4.0. And all that goes with it is now the thesis with which I'm trying to say is based on what is very popularly known in the management literature as the contingency theory. The contingency theory says that there is no best way of managing an organization. It depends upon the situation. And therefore, the real challenge in management is creating a managerial alignment amongst the situational variables. And if you are able to reach the right optimal alignment amongst the situational variables or the contingency variables, you will succeed. And then what's critical is that evolve an organization structure, the managerial style, the governance style and leadership style, and all that goes in the session, keeping in mind that the various contingency variables are in mutual alignment, because the real managerial effectiveness can come only when all these situational variables are in mutual congruence. It is a mismatch of these variables which actually the root cause of most of the managerial ineffectiveness. With that spirit in mind, there are different ways of characterizing situational variables or contingency variables. For the purpose of this presentation, I have taken these 6. The external environment, which indeed is a major change, which indeed the kind of business objectives that you ought to have in that environment, the technology, the people, the structure, and the managerial style. And therefore, in the Industry 4.0 like technological environment, which indeed is a major disruption, and the major disruption because of the globalization and the global competition of business, the major parameters which are causing disruption are the global competition, the technological disruption, and of course in our own context, the people. Because management methods and techniques and systems cannot be transplanted from some other culture to some other culture, and if we do so, we'll be doing it at our peril, and therefore in the process, keeping in mind the profile of the people. And in this context, the profile of the people, which means in Indian context, is also a change, because the people, I've been teaching in IIT Delhi for more than 50 years now, but the kind of students I taught in 68 and then I teach them now are so different. The so-called millennials have a very different profile. Their attitude towards authority, their attitude towards work, and all to teamwork, their expectations, their aspirations. So when we think of designing the future organization, you cannot ignore the kind of mindsets of the people with whom you'll be actually working, because with all technological developments all set, but no system can be 100% technology. It's a very powerful coordination of people, process, and technology that together will determine the success or otherwise. And in that context, the profile of the people ought to be taken care of. With this background, I now try to, and once again, I already said that this is the way that I perceive the future of the organization, with these situational variables to be in mutual alignment. First is called the external environment. It's a very popular term known as VUCA. Today's business environment, because of the highly dynamic nature of global competition, is called a VUCA environment, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Volatile refers to the fast, unpredictable changes without clear patterns or trends. Uncertainty is frequent disruptive changes where the past is not at all a good predictor of the future. Complex is multiple, complex, intertwined technological, societal, geopolitical, and ecological evolutions. And ambiguity is little clarity on what is real or true, and difficult to predict the impact of the action or initiatives. And therefore, the external environment in which we are expected to run our companies and organizations is this, and these, although external environment is what is known as significant others, they are external to your system, but they impact your performance in a substantial way, and you have to have adequate mechanism to take care, because you can't run business by being totally, in fact, in the antithetic to the external environment. So given that kind of a background, the objectives that actually now become relevant, with that global competition, the objectives of business therefore be, a single objective of the business would be to delight your customers better than their competitors do. Now you'd notice that all other sub-objectives of the business would be derived from the single objective. Because to remain in business, you have to delight your customers better than your competitors do, or maximize value delivered to the customer, or value creation for greater customer experience. All these other goals have to be, so you have to evolve goals which finally contribute to that goal, because with given the kind of external environment of business, only then you can perhaps survive in that kind of situation. Therefore, your goals therefore have to be aligned, that all your business objectives have to be eventually aligned to the single super objective of delighting your customers, which would mean that in future the organizations, the customer and the competitors would be the driving forces in the process of decision making. And therefore, that's the way to go about it. The technological change, the major disruptor, is what actually now is a part of technology industry 4.0, which is the cyber physical systems, Internet of Things, where everything is connected to everything. It's not industrial Internet of Things, cloud computing, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, robotics, cobots. Cobots are collaborative robots, where robots will be talking to each other. Imagine in a country when people don't talk to each other, you'd have a situation where robots would be talking to each other. Therefore, you have real challenge to the people to collaborate with robots who themselves are collaborating with other robots. Therefore, big data analytics, blockchains, distributed ledger technology, nano, bio, neurotechnology. These are the trinity of technological developments. Nanotechnology, biotechnology, and neurotechnology, 3D printing or additive manufacturing are some of the major disruptive technological components within which we would be expected to do business, which would mean that many of us of our generations would find very difficult a challenge to update ourselves, our technical background or knowledge to cope up with this kind of disruption technology. And unless we're able to do that, which would mean that there would be enormous power balance between people and machines. And therefore, what goes to the people and what goes to the machines, so that people still become relevant, because I always am a very strong believer that all technology said and done, all artificial intelligence said and done, there is no substitute of people and real intelligence. Because even artificial intelligence is designed by people with real intelligence, and therefore with all the technologies you still need people, and therefore in that case the challenge before the people in the future organizations is, with the kind of disruptive changes taking place in the technology, what kind of structures, what kind of work allocations between people and machines have to be done. Now, the kind of profile of the people, the third important contingency variables which you cannot ignore, the kind of people who would be constituting a workforce. I hazarded a kind of a guess of the kind of profile of the so-called millennials. Millennials, for those of you who may be very not conversant with the term, anybody born after 1984 is called a millennial, which would mean their way of thinking. And I thought that earlier we used to say people born after independence and people born before independence. I happen to belong to a group when I was born before independence. Even say people after independence are so different from people born before independence. Now millennials are also so different from the people, and therefore you ought to be careful about kind of people that you are actually be hiring. And therefore the millennials people profile, the characterization would be, millennials are impatient, they want things quickly. After doing their immediate MBA from a great business school, they want to into the boardroom. Therefore, impatient, tech-savvy, freedom-loving, caring for work-life balance, flexibility-loving individuals, even in a team. That's a beautiful. This applies to Indians. Even in a team, I'm an individual. And therefore, everyone tries to be one-upmanship in the team. So individuals, even in a team, seeking challenge, self-centered but innovative, prefer autonomy, not willing to slog without clear visible rewards, reduced tolerance level, diversity, multicultural workforce, high on integrative complexity. That means they like challenge. Simple routine algorithm 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't impress them. Routine repetitive process of decision making doesn't impress them. And this is where I say a great future for India. The real intelligence of Indian mind, because we are in very, very high on what is known as integrative complexity, would mean that we enjoy taking complex problems. And that's why we make simple problems so complex by ignoring them. And once they become really terribly complex, we solve them and take pride in. We need not have created them to start with, but being high on integrative complexity, we enjoy working on only complex problems. And here, therefore, I believe the future is for us because we're very strong in integrative, high on self-esteem. A small rebuke can hurt you. In fact, you've seen a teacher scolding a child, he commits suicide. You can imagine it was unthinkable during my time. The teachers used to could even slap me, and I still think that he's doing it for my good. And they were influenced by high on self-esteem, influenced by social media and fun-loving, people who would look ahead more than look back, people who are more inspired by future than history. So no point telling that you are a great nation. You have to say what is in it for them and for future, and they do not enjoy being bossed over and are enterprising. This in the kind of people profile that I have tried to hazard a guess. As I said, that it's very difficult to predict, but this is what I thought. So you'll have to design organizations which would actually fit in with this kind of work culture, and therefore the organization structure essentially to cope up with this, with the mutual alignment, would be cross-functional, project-based work teams. Virtual organizations, you may be working for a company which you have never seen. Virtual organizations, networked organizations with global networks, you actually may be tying up with people across the globe, and you may have never met people but other than on Skype or short cycle contractual employment. 9 to 5 jobs are likely to vanish. Short cycle contractual employment, focus on continuous unlearning and relearning. This is a major challenge to educational institutions. Don't teach them thinking that whatever you teach would become. Basically, that's a kind of developing their mind, because every 2 years the knowledge doubles. And therefore, as a result, learning, continuous learning, relearning, varied skill sets. Avoid a journalist having, because he'll be working on different problems at different points in time. Data-driven decision-making, multi-dimensional performance measure metrics, working from home is in fact, it's now not that common. In fact, working from home might become far more common than actually can be anticipated. In fact, the concept of work itself may change, and therefore, these are the kind of situations that will take place. Functional organizations, the departmental silos would vanish. Regular 9 to 5 working jobs with defined career paths would vanish. Short-term contractual engagement with defined deliveries as outcome. The only outcome will be defined deliveries. Certain, within this budget, this cost, this time, you have to deliver your work in those project modules. Therefore, SMART objectives. SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So when you do the goal setting for them, the SMART goal setting would become the order. Teams working as nodes in a dynamic network structure with nodes located at different time zones. People working in US, in India, in Philippines. People working in different nodes located in different time zones, geography, different language, different culture. Hence, managing diversity and multicultural background of employees would be a skill set required. Strong social intelligence and innovative skills will be in demand to address complex issues where routine decision-making will be automated. Digital assistants might perhaps replace personal assistants. I already see that Alexa has become so famous that, in fact, a day may come where Alexa would be replaced, all your executive assistants, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of future. Focus on conventional HR, marketing, advertising will change to strategic outsourcing of these functions with digitization of skills of inventory. On-the-job learning for new tasks before the present job gets over would become a person, once this task is over, he will be simultaneously preparing for the next job. Flexibility in structures, processes, and leadership styles would be, and therefore the key word would be flexibility. In any uncertainty, the only way you can match up uncertainty is flexibility in terms of the leadership style, processes, and structures. Matrix form of organization structure with project modules like work packages with delicate power balance between functional and project teams might be an asset as a skill set. The communication system will be e-transactions, social media, real-time, more transparent, quick feedback on performance, almost immediate. Digital thread would be the interconnected method of subsystems. The skill sets required for these people would be tech-savvy, flexible, team player, tolerant for ambiguity, and this is where India scores very high. Actually, Indian mind is very high tolerance for ambiguity, and this is going to be a strength in future because we are so tolerant on ambiguity, particularly on time front, that plus minus half an hour is not late at all. And therefore, generally, if a conference, even on time management, begins on time, it will be a news item. Therefore, this is going to be a strength in terms of the tolerance for ambiguity, but outcome-oriented. Don't worry about things. Finally, what you deliver is an outcome. It may start late, but if this session gives a great customer experience, it's done. Therefore, that's tolerance for ambiguity, but reskilling frequently with lifelong learning attitude, quick decision-making, agile, and quickly reverting to plan B in case plan A doesn't work, because the kind of the environment, flat structure by eliminating middle layers, direct supply chains, direct from source to destination, local self-healing supply chains to cope up with the disruptions, interconnected through the entire network organization, and capability to simulate alternative policy options on digital twins. Digital twins is a concept in Industry 4.0 where the entire organization is almost simulated virtually, and before you disturb the reality, you can do what if kind of experimentation to find out, and therefore digital twin is almost your parallel organization on which you can play and simulate the options that you could have. Therefore, more and more people would be able to take informed decision based on digital twin. Inverted pyramidal structure, that's an interesting, right now the organization are top management, middle management, operating management. This is going to change with the CEO would be at the lowest level, but the fulcrum at the bottom, doers would be at the top, because the distinction between blue collar and white collar job would vanish, because the kind of people working even at the shop floor level would be fully knowledge workers. So the doers would be at the top, supported by facilitators hinged onto the CEO at the fulcrum. Leadership traits ingrained at all levels of project teams. Every person would have to have an exposure to leadership traits. Focus on value creation, flexibility in leadership style as an asset to cope up with the dynamic external environment, because with the rigidity, one cannot function, because actually the dynamic body often gives an example of why human body is a perfect example of a flexible complex system, and we are living so long as we are flexible. The moment I die, I become rigid. I can't even change my finger. I can't anymore. So therefore, rigidity is synonymous to death in today's world, and therefore those people who are rigid about their methods, leadership style are bound to finish, because in a dynamic, complex world, the key word to survive is flexibility, and therefore the skill traits required for future: empathy, awareness of self and others. This is where Indian value system would require a change, because in my value grid, we have utmost concern for self, but little concern for others. The customer orientation that is going to be center stage in objectives cannot come unless we are empathetic, we empathize with the customer, and therefore awareness for self as well as others, perceptiveness, negotiation, bringing other together and reconciling differences, persuasion, changing minds and hearts is going to the leadership style, assisting and caring, service-mindedness, attitude towards service, and sharing, trust and transparency, and therefore the entire focus of training and learning would be relationships, relevance and rigor. Relationships, relevance and rigor is going to be. Design of the work system would be pull-driven, lean, green supply chains with collaborative competition. Collaborative competition is that you join hands even with your competitor for a greater good, is a win-win situation. Revenue sharing models amongst link partners, concurrent information sharing, trust and technology as the two enablers of relationships. Value delivered to customer will be the marketing strategy. Digital marketing may be in the focus with outsourced HR and advertising function. The leadership style that will fit into the visionary. Playing captains, people would actually demonstrate by doing their job as excellently as they expect others. Playing captains, tax-savvy, inspiring role models as perceived by followers. Learning to learn, flexible, compassionate and strategic in intent, but thorough in implementation with eye for detail. That's again a missing dimension. We're very strategic in India, but we actually miss out the nuts and bolts. And therefore that's where, but the real value addition takes place at the shop floor level, and therefore strategic in intent, but thorough in implementation with eye for details, win-win style for conflict. The ratio of, and of course, the ratio of compensation of the CEO to lowest working team members need to be revisited, because the unseemly ratio that exists today, the kind of millennials who are questioning people, why should he get so much and why should I get so little, may actually create more problems, and therefore there's a need for sensibly revisiting. The processes I've already said would be lean, few non-value adding, transparent, streamlined and data driven. Cryptocurrency will be the form of money flow. Distributed decision-making blockchain will remove the need for any central authority, thus making faster, safer, cheaper delivery of higher value to the customers. And finally, I said that the environment is VUCA. जैसे लोहे को लोहा काटता है, VUCA is also the answer to that VUCA environment, but different VUCA. Therefore, the VUCA response to VUCA environment, which I have, is the value creation. Let value creation be the shared objective among all the link partners. There will be no conflict. If the revenue share model is amongst all of them, if you do great value, you share it, otherwise you all lose together. So value creation, understanding among links partners, collaboration and agility, and therefore to cope with that VUCA environment, you perhaps have this kind of VUCA response where focus on value creation, understanding amongst team members or link partners, collaboration and agility. And customers and competitors will drive all the decision making, value stream mapping to eliminate non-value adding things, preventive focus on quality with reduction on variability and Six Sigma. Focus will be to synchronize technology, people and processes for value creation. The governance will be enabling, result-oriented, autonomy with accountability, involving major stakeholders in it with focus on ethics, including financial ethics, financial transparency, and transparency for the long-term survival. And finally, the skill sets that might be relevant, 2020 is I could lay my hands on, maybe you can extend it. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, customer orientation cannot come unless service oriented, negotiation and cognitive flexibility. These are the kinds of attitudes and skill sets required. And this is the kind of scenario that I foresee the future would be like. What it actually takes place is time will tell. Thank you very much.
That was quite insightful. I'll just, a few points that I took away from this. He spoke about the VUCA environment, started with what the VUCA environment is and how we should now look at VUCA. I think that was a good insight that you gave. And obviously spoke of the management theory, contingency theory, how does all the different variables, how they need to be aligned. I think very nicely summarized the 6 areas which will need to be worked on, and he has given different points under each of those this thing, and you will have a chance during the question answer sessions to ask. But I think the 2-3 things which leave behind is flexible organization, lifelong learning, skill sets which will be required, which are going to be very different from the skill sets that we have today. I think these are the important points that I took away from it. But maybe you have more questions, so when his session comes up. Thank you very much, Professor. And now we will have Professor Veena Bora, who will come share her thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
For these people who have helped me get my presentation on track, please. So, thank you so much. Very good afternoon all over again to the esteemed panel on the days here, as well as all the dignitaries who are present over here. I am making this presentation on behalf of Dr. Saxena as well. And I would like to highlight, thank you so much. I would like to highlight right at the very outset that no exploration of the future of work will ever be conclusive. As you have just been seeing, no exploration of this kind will ever be conclusive. And indeed, this is one of the defining characteristics of the age that we live in. This age which is going to surprise us every now and then, and which is also going to confound us every now and then, which is why we struggle to make sense of it, which is why we struggle to predict trends, have paradigms in place so that we are capable enough to cope with it. When we are looking at this very critical theme of organizations of the future, we do need to keep some aspects of this in mind. Nothing of what I'm going to say today is so remarkably different from what speakers have been talking about yesterday or have been speaking about today as well. However, I would like to present some different dimensions to add on to what those speeches have touched upon. The first and the foremost, what I would like to put into place is, if you take a look at some of the forces of change, that's what Professor Prem also highlighted and began his address with. If you take a look at the forces of change, we are taking a look at mind-boggling technological breakthroughs which are coming at us at a very astounding speed. And before we can make sense of it, the technology has changed all over again. We are also face to face with huge humongous demographic shifts across the world. We have an aging population in the West, we have a very young population here in India, and we are also looking at very different marketplaces across the world. And so organizations today, as well as of the future, are going to face some very different kinds of consumer pulls, which is also married with the huge urbanization that is happening across the world. Everybody wants to move to the cities and the towns, and nobody wants to be in rural spaces anymore. This is also marked by another huge force of change, which is the global economic power shifts that are happening across the world. You're seeing a change in the US and huge policy shifts over there. We have seen shifts in the Russian policies. We have seen shifts in France, in Europe. This is a world which is probably post-Brexit now, post-Trump, and forces of change are only becoming stronger and stronger. What does this mean for the workplace today as well as for the future? It just means that we have to learn to undo our learning about how work is structured, how work is designed, how workplaces are designed, how the workforce is going to be skilled for the future. Does this have implications? Yes, it does. It has implications across all levels. Implications for individuals, implications for organizations, implications for societies and for countries, which also refers to the public policy formulation, right? These are some predictions that we are looking at. We are seeing that technological breakthroughs are going to create more jobs. And a World Economic Forum report has recently identified some of the emerging skills as well as the declining skills, which I'm just putting up here for you to take a look at. If you see this list of 10 emerging skills, which is for the year 2022, and it's not that far away, it's just around the corner, you will see a lot of technological skills over there, and this is also balanced with human skills, right? So please keep this in mind. You have on this list technological skills balanced by human skills. These are emerging skills for 2022 according to World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report. These are the declining skills, and take a look at these. These include manual dexterity right down to management of personnel towards the mid, and towards the end, it's the use of technology as well as monitoring and control. Skills that are on the decline for 2022. Another report that I researched on is also saying that 65% of primary school children, by the time they come into the workforce, they are going to be taking up jobs which we cannot even envision today. 65% of that workforce, that future workforce, we do not know what kind of jobs they will be holding on to. And these are skills that we are familiar with, and we're also looking at the emerging skills that I highlighted out a little earlier. The same report is also highlighting which are the jobs to watch out for. These are some of the hot jobs that are going to become hotter, if you would allow me to use that term. Again, big data, analytics is a big part of it. As also, if you see towards the end, you have organization development specialists. Now, this requires, again, not lower level knowledge, but higher level knowledge as well as application. Knowledge about organizations, knowledge about systems thinking, design thinking, and knowledge about how social systems move and need to become agile as well as flexible. Now, if we take a look at all of these trends and if we put all of these together, these are the three paradigms, so as to say, which we are living in and we have to move towards. If you take a look at what's happening today, we are in a world of assisted intelligence, and this is characterized by technology automating repetitive jobs and tasks that we are doing currently. And so we are going to be assisted by intelligence. And what is this going to increase the demand of? Typically the STEM jobs and the STEM skills. If we move to the era which is emerging slowly and up ahead that we have to face, it's the era of augmented intelligence. And this is going to cause a fundamental shift in the nature of work, which means this is the era of collaboration. Collaboration between whom? It's the collaboration of human skills as well as technology skills. And therefore, what becomes more valuable are uniquely human traits: emotional intelligence, social intelligence, creativity, innovation, persuasion, negotiation. All of these become more pricey companies are going to compensate these higher as we go along. The future, as is being predicted, is going to be the era of autonomous intelligence. Something for you and me to worry about. Is this going to be an era where we will have any job at all? And so therefore, the future of humans at the workplace is going to be slowly questioned. So these are the possibilities that we are up against. And let me take you through another very astounding kind of a report that I came across. This was the work that was done at PwC. And essentially their work began in 2007, this research that they've done, along with James Martin Institute for Science and Civilization at Oxford. This research covered 10,000 survey takers across countries like India, China, Germany, US, as well as the UK. And these were questions around how will the future of the workplace look like? What will be its impact on the working lives of humans? And so if you take a look at this model that they came out with, it speaks about several dimensions, right? So if you look at the spectrum of collectivism versus individualism, you have one end of the spectrum which talks about groups, which talks about societies, which talks about civilizations. That's collectivism, where the values of fairness and equality will dominate, even in the future. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have the unit of one, n is equal to 1. That's what customization is about even today. And that's that end of the spectrum is all about individuals, individualism, where people are going to be about me and myself. That's what the concerns are going to be. Now, if you look at the other spectrum, the vertical spectrum that we have, you have corporate integration towards the south end, which talks about conglomerates, which talks about consolidation, which talks about organizations which are bigger than countries altogether, and where brands are going to rule the day. And at the north end of this spectrum, you have fragmentation. Small is powerful is the philosophy over here. Now, guess what is binding all of this together? It's technology. So think about it, business fragmentation. If we look at this end of the spectrum, technology is going to make the small businesses very powerful. Think startups, think startup ecosystems. Technology is a huge leveler over there. And the smaller players are much more agile and flexible using technology. On the other hand, if you look at the south end of this spectrum, which is about corporate integration, here again, technology is a big player, is a big leverage which the conglomerates are going to use in order to bring costs down, in order to reach customers, in order to make themselves available to a wider customer base. This model has been overlayered by the different worlds. These are the different possibilities that will exist in the world of tomorrow. There is a possibility that you have a world where the yellow philosophy rules. That's the top quarter, which combines business fragmentation and collectivism. What is the philosophy over there? The philosophy over there is human in nature. Okay? What's good for humans? What's good for me, my race, my civilization? If you take a look at the green world, it's all about our environment, our societies, groupism, where groups, affinity groups, will become more powerful. Now, if you look at a combination of individualism as well as corporate integration, you have the blue world, where the corporates rule supreme and they are catering to individual consumers, and customization becomes important, again on the back of technology. And the fourth world that we are looking at as a possibility that might emerge is the very deadly and dangerous combination of individualism as well as business fragmentation. And what is going to happen over here is that small players, individuals, will rule the day, and anarchy will be existing in our society because there will be no rules of collectivism. It will all be what is good for me is good for the world, and I do not care anything about the world at large. So that's these are the four worlds and the four possibilities that we are looking at a much more serious, in a much more serious ways. If these are the worlds that we are faced, the possibility of leading, designing for, really thinking about, then we've got our work cut out for us, but because we have to look at what structures will fall into place, what leadership processes will become useful to guide the worlds of the future. And if you really look at organization structures, I'd like you to think about the model of the company man, right? Our earlier generations, the model of the full-time permanent employee worked his whole life with how many companies? One company. And at the end of that employment, they would get a gold watch, they would get a comfortable pension, and they would fade away into oblivion. However, after this post-World War II society, things began to get very complicated because the digital revolution stepped in. The digital revolution brought with it advances in computing, telecommunications, and this was on the back of the omnipresent internet. International trade agreements have broken down. Outsourcing, globalization have shown their true colors. I would like to highlight over here that we are still in the middle of the digital transformation, the digital revolution, and we still do not know how to label it. We still do not know how to characterize it, whether we should call it the digital age, should we call it the gig economy, should we call it the shared economy. Today's world includes wild inventions that would have seemed like science fiction to the workers of yesterday's assembly line. Rather than taking jobs as cab drivers, we have people who are just downloading apps from an online transportation company, think Uber, and they are driving their own vehicles and are accessing fares right around them. We have other online mobile marketplace companies, and what is the platform that they're all working on? These are all platform companies. They are not organizations as you and I knew about it, or our earlier generations knew about it. Again, coming back to the kind of structure that we were thinking of and looking at, you may have been familiar with the traditional metaphor that was used for the organization, which was a machine, right? Today's metaphors are more appropriately termed as organisms, amorphous, flexible, taking the shape of the situation that they are in. And several kinds of organizations have gone through these transformations, renewing themselves, taking on a much more organic structure. What does it mean? Is the organization as we know it fading away? It's not going to survive anymore? No, it's not. It's just that its shape is changing. What is becoming very obvious to us is that people are attaching themselves to organizations for different reasons. I would like you to think about Maslow's hierarchy. I think everybody over here would know what Maslow's hierarchy looks like, right? You have the physiological needs at the bottom, and then you progress towards the self-actualization. Well, if you think of what people joined organizations for, right from the pre-industrial ages, it was for the fulfillment of their physiological needs. And today, people are joining organizations for the fulfillment of their self-actualization needs. So the way that organizations have grown up till now really synchronizes with the way that Maslow, Abraham Maslow, designed his levels or needs or motivations, motivational hierarchy. And so the company today, the organization today, is morphing into much more than just a benefactor who is really signing off on the paychecks. So companies are becoming very agile, and so are employees becoming extremely agile today. Now, when you're looking at employees today, what kind of skill sets they require is something we've already seen, but what kind of needs will they have? And these needs are what organizations will have to fulfill. Given the transitory nature of work that we have today, workplaces will have to make an effort in order to provide a respectful environment for all the employees at the workplace. And this is far beyond what organizations of the past were designed for. So more and more of us are coming to the workplace in order to fulfill our needs for self-actualization. Now, since we're also changing as employees and we are expecting the employees of tomorrow to change, leaders of tomorrow will also have to change. And all of this is converging towards the last point over here, which is all about fluidity. Fluidity of roles, fluidity of needs, fluidity of employee skills, and therefore leaders also need to be much more fluid than before. If you think about leadership, today leadership looks much like it did in pre-industrial tribal societies. What used to happen then? Groups of extended families would come together and they would nominate somebody to become their leader. On what criteria? On the criteria of their wisdom, on the criteria of their strength, on the criteria of their love for the community. And based on all of this, the chiefs derived, or the leaders derived their authority. People would listen to them. Now, when the chief made a mistake, or when the leader made a mistake, the people would simply disalign themselves from his leadership and they would stop listening to them. Think social media today. Think influencers on social media today. Think of how our children sign up for these influencers, whom companies are paying because they have followers. These followers and leaders model is very similar to what I just described earlier, where we used to have leaders in tribes. Today, on social media, the more followers you have, the more you're seen as a thought leader, the more you're seen as an influencer. And this is what companies are gravitating towards and are compensating. And so these are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And this is going to be the leadership and followership model of tomorrow. Additional things that leaders will have to pay attention to, apart from remaining authentic, they will also have to be able to draw a lot upon the trust of their employees. And this is where communication starts counting a lot. Leaders of tomorrow, of tomorrow's organizations, are always going to be in the area of flux. They will have to manage very actively. And this does require them to promote the values of transparency, the values of fairness, and also they need to be extremely careful that the business values go hand in hand with technology. Technology and business values have to be extremely well integrated for the leaders of tomorrow. Well, taking you ahead to think about what kind of organizational processes will help the organizations of the future, I think over here it would not be out of place to refer you to the saying of the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who said over 2,000 years ago, the more you know, the less you understand. This is, in fact, key to the unraveling of the age that we are in today, the age of information overload. And the key to extracting power from information actually lies in the ability to synthesize large amounts of data, recognizing patterns, extracting essentials, finding meaning, finding direction. How are organizations going to survive this? They're going to do this on the twin abilities of exploitation as well as exploration. And this researchers in the field of management and organizational studies have termed as ambidexterity. So the more ambidextrous organizations are, the more they're exploiting their surroundings, the more they're exploring and innovating in order to become organizations of the future, the better prepared they are going to be. Are there some capabilities that organizations can use in order to become more ambidextrous in nature? These are the three pillars of sensing, seizing, as well as reconfiguring. Now, sensing is all about making sense of the environment, particularly in rapidly shifting marketplaces. This requires scanning, searching, and huge amounts of feedback loops that an organization can prepare for itself. Seizing opportunities is about the right decision-making and executing, while reconfiguring is all about the right kind of resource allocation. In the earlier session, Mr. Rekhy had spoken about being asset light. Well, reconfiguring is about allocating your assets in the right manner, moving them between exploitation to exploration. Towards the end of this prediction about what organizations of the future should look like, I would like to take you back several years to what Abraham Maslow spoke about when he was trying to, in his time, predict the future. He said, and I quote, "If we want to know how fast a human being can run, then it is no use to average out the speed of a good sample of the population. It is far better to collect Olympic gold medal winners and see how well they can do. If we want to know the possibilities for growth, spiritual growth, value growth, moral development in human beings, then I maintain that we can learn the most by studying our moral, ethical, or saintly people." This was what Abraham Maslow said long back. And I am reminded of this because very recently when I attended a mindfulness summit there were the two big tech majors, Microsoft and Google. And they have instituted mindfulness practices in-house. Now, anybody would say that Microsoft and Google are what organizations of the future look like. Well, my question to them was, why have you instituted mindfulness practices in-house? And the executive from Google gave me a very beautiful response, which I would like to share with you. He said, think about an Olympic runner, think about an Olympic performer. At what level of performance are they? And I said, yes, I can imagine that. He said, now think of a company of lakhs of employees of such Olympic performers. The kind of burnout they face, the kind of stress that they face has made it very important for us to focus on these skills of mindfulness as well as emotional intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, as we speak about technology, let's not forget that some skills are going to be irreplaceable. And so in the organizations and organizational processes of the future, let's attach a heart to this drone and say that human skills will always be required. Thank you so much for listening to me and for your attendance.
Thank you, Professor Veena. I think that was a very enlightening session. You took us on a journey. You spoke about fluidity, flexibility, agility, both for the employer as well as the employee. The last quote which you gave, I think that said it all, because emotional intelligence, empathy is going to be ethics. We have discussed that trust, that is going to be very, very important, more so in a technology-driven world where the touch factor is going to get reduced and where technology is going to overtake. I think the trust that people will have in organizations will have to be insurmountable in the sense, and organizations will need to stand up. Similarly, employees also. And also the new employee, what he or she is looking for is very different from what people like me, when we joined our organizations, look for. Very, very different. And the one point I'd just like to add out here, this new generation looks for instant gratification. And I think that is something that will need to be factored in by organizations as they go in, because I don't think people are going to wait for their bonus for the year end. They'll say, okay, you've done it, why don't you have monthly bonus, quarterly bonus? I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen immediately, but I don't see that day not happening when people will get those kind of gratifications. But I think your session was really good. And I think a lot of people, you spoke about business values being aligned to technology, and one should not forget about it, because at the end of it, it's all about trust, transparency, fairness, and the underlying values under which companies and individuals operate that will be very important. Thank you once again for that insight. And now I will ask Sunil to give his comments. He's more from the industry, so this will be a little different. We had two professors. Now let's hear it from the industry.
Good evening to all. In fact, it's a privilege to have such distinguished minds available here. Well, the topic was organization of future, and forecasting, famously said, many times forecasts are always wrong, especially when it's for future. In fact, we see also even most of the time the data-driven forecasts. You try to apply forecasting methods. Some are harsh models, overfit. Some are mild. So you kind of try to ensemble and then paint a picture and arrive at a forecast. So my attempt probably would be that I have certain questions which still remain unanswered. Though, of course, I have tried to build something around it. So I would like you also, in fact, you can contribute, understand my queries and questions, and that way probably we should go. So the topic, essentially, it's one of the difficult ones. And the reasons probably for my difficulty would be what probably I'll share. Now, one of the things that we have seen most of the time, as professors have mentioned about VUCA, definitely great, and then many of the challenges, as many panelists have raised, we also see that there's a typical mindset that have changed in the humanity. Typically, if I were to say, scarcity mindset was largely what has happened in the previous decades, where organizations would largely be technologically constrained. A lot of costs were involved. So you would just stick to your processes, do not experiment much with the technology. And kind of, you have strict rules where everything is forbidden, and you don't talk much about innovation. However, this mindset we see growing quite a lot in the past few decades, and maybe these are some of the reasons that are responsible for the things that we see today. So most of the time when we look at the leading companies of the world, they're all technology companies and they're technology empowered, if not themselves as technology companies. They're all discovery centric. The kind of patents, innovations that we're seeing obviously is at the highest pace as compared to the modern history. Value focus, as several speakers have highlighted, and you are allowed to do a lot of experimentation, change, think about ideas, talk. That was not the case. Which brings me to this thing, and we see that typically we're talking about fourth industrial revolution, and this is something if I try to apply some traditional mathematical analysis to it, evolutionary biologists say that the human beings have been around for maybe 1 lakh, 2 lakh, and now it is, I think, 1 million years as they're speaking. So I cannot figure out what happened in the just 200 years that we are labeling, in the 19th century, the first industrial revolution. And just within that, we had labeling 2 of more industrial revolutions. And in this century, it's only, I think 80% of the century is yet to come. We are already labeled 1 more industrial revolution. My worry is what happens next. And I say I would be acting like a radical model, which talks about outliers and etc. I don't know. For me, IoT, cloud, big data, AI, or whatever terms they are, is just the beginning. The baby steps that probably human beings have ever taken, or I just see them as eggs, and what come out of eggs, black swans, dinosaurs, everything, this is something which probably I thought I should ask. Also, when we should level and what we should label as the fifth industrial revolution. I don't understand, I don't have scenarios for me. So maybe, conference sometimes, this kind of conferences would happen on Mars, could be a possibility. This is just forecast from my side. You're there to add. So this is the kind of things, that keeps disturbing me, and probably somebody might help me also. Here, we have seen already the trends, and generally, typically for a forecast, all we have to do is to just the number, the traditional way of forecasting. So when I look at the numbers, they're all in favor of machine learning applications becoming a wide use in terms of the dollar values, or in terms of the surveys, or in terms of the job market, the trends we see. They're kind of all exponential. But at the same time, the worry is still there. Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk have put it that way. Whether it is good for the humanity as a whole, or maybe it would turn out like a Terminator or that iRobot movie that, everybody becomes a slave of a robot. So that's the kind of a background which actually increases my difficulty. Well, some trends, some surveys, the organizations of many industries, in fact, an industry-wide phenomena, we see that the investments are going up. More and more organizations are looking forward to such kind of technologies. And typically in 2017, if you were to compare the investments which are going to AI worldwide, there would be 3 times in the coming year. And this number is going to increase furthermore. So that is something we have trends, and how the organizations would shape up. So in fact, kind of trends that we see would be a response to VUCA or maybe any other name that we can give. What we're going to see is that the organizations would be spread across the globe, but in much smaller teams. But at the same time, they'll always be connected. We are seeing the trends already with many of the leading organizations, but these are just the trends and the hints. The future still, I'm not sure how exactly it will evolve. The term entrepreneurs, maybe we will call them intrapreneurs. The organizations themselves would breed a set of innovative people inside them. They might have a payment scheme or a bonus scheme, but that is something which is the way ahead. Otherwise, you can't limit employees in a single set, process-centric working environment. They would move out and they might want to start their own ventures. That hints and the trends are already there, in the number of startups that we see in India. Also, there are a lot of processes that we see today might change. Typical HR performance reviews, there may be potential-based reviews rather than what you have achieved in a year. It will become more like, looking into the potential. And most of the companies, if you were to see, the Netflix, for example, the revenue model, it's not the one. But they're seeing a potential, and then, they're investing there. Focus on the customer needs. Probably it will be focused on immediate wants that they have, the immediate gratification, maybe for the customer and the employee, but the organization has to take care for that. In fact, there are organizations which are working on that model. So look at Swiggy, what it does. So earlier when the man wanted food, maybe the wife was the solution, but then you want restaurants, so restaurants came in. But now you want to say, don't want to go to a restaurant, then Swiggy has the answer for that. So what more kind of companies, business models gonna come, I'm not sure. Of course, the adaptability and the agility, as pointed out, would still remain. Innovation would be the order of the day. I also sense it, or probably I might be wrong, but then everything would move on to cloud as far as the IT infrastructure is there. Maintaining, managing big systems on premises, that is something I see would go away. And the future is with the cloud. Some hints and trends that I also see is more women engagement that would happen. So we have the data that we can churn out and see how, whether it is a dual world or a developing country, the number of women entering the workforce is always increasing. So that's a good thing. Organizations gonna become flat, and the celebration of success would become along with customer, wherein the customers are involved, maybe in the kickoff meetings, etc. So that is just a thought. The learning would take a different shape. So I would spend a little bit extra time on the learning and education as one of the topics, like what might happen to education. The focus, the glorious sin, as we call it, making profits or profitability, probably it would change to something called as prosperity. We might talk about prosperity indexes in corporates, with CSR increasing a lot. Again, as I said, it's one of my models to look into. And the futuristic outlook would be one of the game changers for the organizations of the future. Well, having said that, the company structures are also, as we said, they're moving flatter. New terms would become like flatarchies or holacratic organizations, the small organizations within organizations with their own prosperity goals. That's how the entire thing will happen, spread across all the boundaries across the globe. The corporate governance and the BI governance, they would go hand in hand. And more IT would have a role to play. The hints are already there, how the IFRS 9 regulations are hinted. Within, the demand is that the IT tool itself should be able to distinguish, figure out any non-compliance that is happening and report it on the spot. Regulations like anti-money laundering, etc., we are moving from batch mode to, let's say, a real-time mode kind of a thing. So it would go hand in hand, and somewhere, the IT governance, which is seen separately from the overall business governance, would somewhere merge. So that is something I believe. Well, for the leadership, of course, much have been said, but few things. The leaders would be more digital savvy or tech savvy. They would always be data driven. Of course, the other tenets, they remain as it is. Customer focus, cultural dexterity, agility, ability to learn, and adaptability, and the collaborative behavior. That would be the utmost required skills in a leader that we look forward to. Well, having said all this, and probably some of these things I would need your help. Now on the education front, see, every industrial revolution has brought in a way we impart education to our generations. So one of the first IMB, I think Howard 1900s or something, after World War, when the mass production, etc., everything happened. So we need people to manage. So every revolution would be following the ways to teach and nurture our younger generations. So something on that I thought I should share. Well, first of all, this reminds me of the Pink Floyd Brick on the Wall song, if I'm not wrong. This has to go. We are seeing it already. Typically, 500 to 600 engineering colleges are being shut in our country yearly basis. And there are reasons for that. Markets are rejecting the traditional system. But what might be the replacement for that? Something like this. So once again, this is my thought. As I said, I would be a radical model forecasting much on the outlier side of it. Colleges and universities would be breeding grounds. Startups might join in. VCs might come in. The outcome would be some kind of innovation or business models. And here, the curricula, the methods and all that, so I've kept some thought process around it. The language will change. The faculty, I think, who are teachers and professors, you would see in a setup that I was just showing, there would more be inventors, entrepreneurs, and self-learners. So that would be the faculty in a system like this. We would also see the learning material, which is largely the books or the articles we talk about. Internet, simulators, gadgets, AI bots, games would take place in a system that would support constant innovation and the firms or the businesses that delivers to the society. The university funding, which is largely grants and fees, would largely be run by consulting services, venture capitalism, venues which are largely brick and mortar. There would be a campus which doesn't have boundary. It's all on internet, social media groups or something like that. So that is my view of campus. Hints are already there. We are seeing a lot of MOOCs and universities operating this way. So all the courses are innovative. You use a lot of visual aids, no borders. All schedules are flexible, no bar on student age or backgrounds. Everything getting distributed online. Contents are all automated. And more often peer group evaluations rather than running the traditional way of examination systems, virtual access to labs, everything getting immediate online feedback both for the teacher and the student who is doing exams most of the time, anytime, anywhere, self-proctored. The reason being the kind of courses that the next revolution or probably few years from now would require won't have a fixed curriculum or something like that. The outcomes might not be a degree or diploma. We must be looking for, today I pay 35 lakhs, maybe get an MBA. Tomorrow I come with 35 lakhs, start a company, get out of that, and probably my fee get also reimbursed if I'm coming up with a great business model or an idea. So the curriculums won't be what we tell the students. Largely they get co-created. Students are generally young, teenager, middle-aged. That is what we see. In the going forward times, you would have old people, professionals, and the student, you're a student for the lifelong. You decide what you want to study. As I said, the evaluation itself would become continuous anytime, anywhere. The research, which is largely in the academic circles, is all about publishing publishing articles, so they say publish or perish. In the new system, or for the revolutionary stage that we are entering, it no longer be maybe publishing, it also be patents, innovations, and disruptive technologies that you talk about or you have developed. So these are some of my thoughts. And as I said, probably I might be right, might be wrong, forecasts are always wrong. But I would like you to probably give some inputs whenever in the Q&A session or this time. Thank you very much.